A bank in Pittsburgh, 19th of April 1995. A young man enters, a gun in his hand, shouting to be handed money. The terrified employees abide his commands. The robber takes the money and leaves. Very shortly after, another bank's employees and customers have to suffer the same, the young man leaving with significant amount of cash. Nothing of this sounds any different from most bank robberies one has heard about or seen in fiction, right? Well, what if I told you that Mr. McArthur Wheeler was arrested the very same night for a very interesting reason? He had not covered his face in any of the robberies, in a time of security cameras already being far distributed in such buildings. Well, to us in the cameras, he did not do anything to conceal his face. In his mind, he indeed had, as he had put on lemon juice all over his face, reasoning what works for invisible ink surely would make his face invisible as well, still shouting as he was being arrested, "But I wore the juice, I wore the juice." If you happen to be already familiar with the story, you know that we are intending to speak about the so-called Dunning-Kruger Effect, according to which the least bright tend to be the most sure of themselves in their blissful ignorance, named after two researchers who allegedly were inspired by this then latest example of small criminal stupidity. They conducted tests in which some results, to quote the abstract directly, people tend to hold overly favorable views of their abilities in many social and intellectual domains. The authors suggest that this overestimation occurs in part because people who are unskilled in these domains suffer a dual burden. Not only do these people reach erroneous conclusions and make unfortunate choices, but their incompetence robs them of the metacognitive ability to realize it. Across 4 studies, the authors found that participants scoring in the bottom quartile on tests of humor, grammar, and logic grossly overestimated their test performance and ability. Although their test scores put them in the 12th percentile, they estimated themselves to be in the 62nd, which in less complicated terms means that they measured that the worst scoring test participants tended to estimate themselves far above their actual results when asked about their confidence where they stood in comparison to their peers. Stay with us, we will be concluding this with a twist originating from Scientific American from 2023. Yet for now, it is of course easy to understand why one would easily believe this, as there is much data to enforce this perception, as for example in a Swedish study, 93% of drivers claim to perceive their skills as above average, to take one quite obvious example to where people's perception and realities lie. In the same context, an interesting graph has been designed which shows the actual development curve on a self-reflection capable individual. At first, one is really sure of himself as one dives into the topic and recognizes so many obvious leverage points for improvement. Once a little more into the matter yet, one realizes how little one actually understands, which easily leads into the so-called valley of despair, from which one hopefully someday arises to reach the so-called plateau of sustainability, being aware that each topic is complex and easy answers tend to be misleading. A fundamental problem is that thinking requires huge amounts of energy, while our brain does everything it can to have us avoid it, rather giving in to so many pleasuring distractions our world offers. In gaining knowledge, there is also a curve observable. An entry trainee might just know so much about his field that he thinks he knows everything and is especially superior to anyone outside his esteemed field. When yet then, hopefully the amount of learning is increased, one soon realizes a fact, which is of great pain to myself on a regular basis as well, that humanity in so many fields has gained so much knowledge, one could dedicate his or her whole life to one field of research and still never be able to even read through all of existing knowledge in this field. I think it was Schopenhauer who said, if you want to buy more books than you can ever read, that is the soul reaching towards infinity. So, officially and wholeheartedly welcome to the Stratagems Club, if you know what I mean, and similarly regularly sigh about your 500 watch, read and hearing lists, coming up with ever newer schemes to prioritize. Well, actually this short excerpt in the field rather gets summarized with that one becomes aware of the myriad complexities of any issue, which continuously then leads into the so-called valley of despair, where many give up. While such who excel and become experts of their field always are this modest to admit that they possibly cannot know all and therefore most often happily engage in conversation and discussion. Yet if we especially look at winning the public vote in public debate, if we take for example one very self-assured layperson with much fire and dedication to bring positive change, a more calm student who additionally is very much aware of how little she knows, and a very calm, always possible derivations and causalities and side effects stressing professor, One could say sadly there is a clear indication that the most confident persons tend to win this very public perception vote, as we have a sense to trust the most reassuring person, to which we will come back in the closing remarks. But, as we found on Scientific American during research for this episode, there are such who claim that in their own experiments the deviation between lower scoring and highest scoring students did not really mean too much, was not really significant, as the highest scoring students were similarly tending to estimate their own results as uncertainly as the lowest scoring, stressing that a potential bias could have been applied in the original works, by focusing on these lowest performing students overestimating their results. Also, bringing measurements of humor into such a test seems kind of needlessly subjective and distorting the original authors. But also, there are other reasons why we might feel so, and why human communication has remained so difficult, as for other complicating factors. For example, 2/3 of people do not have inner dialogue, and possibly the same amount have problems with or are simply not able to think in an abstract manner. Please let us know in the comments section if you would like to see more such basic videos and possibly step up our research on a psychiatrist possibly elaborating on these different circumstances on our eco channel. What we can draw from the hypothesis alone, as we did not check for peer reviews of this later claim, and also surely can confirm from own experiences that also very smart people can highly overestimate themselves, especially when transcribing from their own fields of expertise into others, which is why in conclusion we should note: A. We have a bias to trust the most convinced. B. As there are enough examples every new year of a newest Theranos, Enron and anything getting funded. C. Opportunity could lie outside of groupthink and underestimated assets and ideas. If established majority is laughing at something, that can serve as a great indicator. GameStop. Which is why we might be leading you on the wrong trail with the study now being cited in Fortune magazine. We couldn't find any journal publications, but with release date 2023, it could take a while if it were to be peer-reviewed. Yet one might add that simulating however many people on an algorithm basis might never do the real trick to assessing the human factor. But what do we do when in doubt? Well, if you're in doubt, you already can rule out that you yourself suffer from the Dunning-Kruger Effect. Congratulations. True mastery is then to diligently present one's works or options of actions with such people one knows, possibly no more than oneself, and decide based on the regarding feedback, like asking a professor a question about his most current publications, or just to surround oneself with advisors rooted in realism, which is also much important, as groupthink, as well as confirmation bias, fastly can engulf an organization or even whole society, while leaders who never anyone tells no, plus authority and influence at least equals dump mega projects, if not worse. If you would like to know more about such, for example check out our first video on all propaganda techniques in existence, as well as let us know if you would like us to progress our every logical fallacy script. So what do you think? Have you experienced the Dunning-Kruger effect in others, or do you think this is just another elitist academia slams less blessed class for believing in themselves, approaching a topic on a biased basis to stress biased aspects in the results? Thanks for watching, this concludes my elaborations.